We've exhausted all of our cliche metaphors for the dawning of a new day. Is that all of them? Do we have another one? Oh, yeah. I thought we had another one. All right, that's all we've got. We're done now. When you wake up Sunday morning, unless you live in Arizona or Hawaii, you will very likely have slept late without sleeping in. And that's because on Sunday at 2 a.m., daylight saving time begins, and we spring forward. Remember that spring forward, fall back? We're springing forward. If it seems like the time change is coming a little early this year, it is, relatively speaking. In 2007, the Energy Policy Act went into effect, which makes daylight saving start about 3 weeks earlier than it used to. Why do we change the clocks at all, let alone change them earlier now? Well, it's for the farmers, so they can get their food to market when it's super fresh. Also, extra daylight keeps criminals off the streets. And daylight saving saves energy for obvious reasons, right? Because you don't need to turn on the lights as early. Those are some of the ways that daylight saving time has been explained, and it turns out that none of them are true. Farmers have hated daylight saving time since it was first proposed more than 100 years ago. They generally say it makes their mornings harder, not easier. Also, on the crime thing, crime generally goes up in the summer, which is during daylight saving time. And in terms of the energy issue, some energy costs seem to go down with daylight saving time, but some seem to go up. The studies of this, and there have been a bunch of them, seem to be a wash at best. Whether you love it or hate it, in full disclosure, I love daylight saving time more than anything. The reasons that most of us think we have daylight saving time, the reason that explains this wonderful thing that we do, are generally all bunk. Joining us now is Michael Downing. He's a creative writing professor, a novelist, and an insanely knowledgeable guy on the topic of daylight saving time. He's the author of Spring Forward, the annual madness of daylight saving time. Michael, thank you very much for being here. I'm looking forward to talking to you about this.
I'm happy to join you, Rachel.
I know that you are a novelist and a creative writing professor by trade. What got you interested in this topic in particular?
It was really simple. I was 45 years old. I put my finger into the face of the clock one October, and I thought, how am I serving American agriculture exactly? I'd grown up with the farmer myth, and I thought, you know, there aren't many things I've been doing for this long that I don't understand. And that was the beginning of the project. I started to talk to friends, and everyone had the same idea I had, and we were all wrong, of course.
Well,
that's how the book began.
What was the farmer myth, and what's the truth about farmers and daylight saving time?
I grew up like most Americans thinking that somehow we did daylight saving to help the farmers get their produce to market. Well, it turns out, of course, farmers were the only Americans who really used morning sunlight. So let's say it's 1916, and they got to get their crops harvested. They need the sun to see them, and the markets are going to open at 9 o'clock in the cities. They've got 3 hours to get that done. You pass a daylight saving law, you turn the clocks forward. Now the farmers have 1 less hour to do the same amount of work. Farmers hated daylight saving time. It was terrible for them.
Well, what about the post-farmer myth? Or maybe it always existed alongside the farmer myth, and that's the idea that daylight saving time saves energy. This is something that I know that it was part of the reason, part of the discussion around the oil embargo in the 70s. It's part of the justification for the modern extension of daylight saving time. What's the rationale and what's the truth?
The rationale is this. Early in the 20th century, William Willett, a Brit, noticed that people were sleeping through the early sunrises with their curtains closed, and he thought if you pushed the clocks forward and gave them that hour of sunlight in the evening, they'd use it and not waste a natural resource. A few things changed over 100 years. One of them was our consumption patterns and the way we produce electricity in this country. There's been a 100-year effort to try to squeeze a drop of oil out of our clocks. It has yet to work. Richard Nixon tried it during the oil embargo, notably a long-time opponent of daylight saving time. Richard Nixon got desperate during the embargo, turned to year-round daylight saving. It was so unpopular and such a failure that within 2 months he had to rescind the policy. Cut to 2005, the Energy Act. Congress, again, its favorite energy-saving proposition is daylight saving, and there's a reason for that. It doesn't ask Americans to conserve. It has no direct cost to taxpayers, so it's fantastically popular, though it doesn't do a darn thing.
But around the 2007 or the 2005 change, because they voted on it in 2005, it went into effect in 2007, right?
That's right.
They did a study by the Department of Energy that said that extending daylight saving time by a few weeks would save us, what was it? It was like 1.3 terawatts of electricity, that it would save us all of this electricity. Did they not account for other types of energy we would use more of, or do you dispute that we would actually save that electricity?
There are two things. First of all, energy use is variable year to year, so there have been dozens of studies. The most comprehensive study was done in Indiana right after they first adopted daylight saving, which turned out that Indianans were paying about $8.6 million a year for daylight saving in energy costs. So there are differing studies, but here's the most important thing that the Department of Energy didn't look at in their study and has never done a full study of. Since 1930, the petroleum industry has known this. When Americans are given extra sunlight in the evening, it absolutely changes our habits. And we go to the ballpark and we go to the mall. But Americans don't walk there, we drive. Daylight saving reliably increases energy consumption by driving up gasoline usage. So on the whole, it has been for 100 years an energy loser.
So you're bumming me out because I like daylight saving time because I sleep late. And so I think it just makes me happier. Do you actually think, with all the things that you've looked at it, I'm willing to believe that all of the rationales that have been offered for doing it are bunk, but I'm still in favor of it because it makes me happy? After all that you've looked into and all that you've exposed about how much bunk there is in those rationales, do you think it should be abolished?
No, I'm a devoted fan of late summer evenings. I love the beach. I grew up in New England. You know, you can't give me enough summer. So I think this. I think it's a cynical substitute for real energy policy. It's a retail spending plan. It definitely helps some small retail businesses, and it has some social benefits which we all enjoy. Just stop selling it to us as an energy policy and give us something real as a way to conserve.
That is cogent, and it makes sense, and it doesn't bum me out. So let's leave it there. Michael Downing. Michael Downing is the author of Spring Forward, the annual madness of daylight saving time. I really, really appreciate your help with this. Thanks a lot, Mr. Downing.
Thank you.